You know, it is it's a funny thing about human beings. We spend our entire lives like trying to leave a mark on the world.
Right. Building houses, writing books.
Exactly, carving our initials into trees. And then when the end comes, the absolute most universal expectation is that we will leave behind some kind of monument.
Yeah, a heavy mahogany casket or, a polished marble urn.
Granite headstones that promise to stand for centuries, right? There is this incredibly deep physical weight to how we process death. We want to anchor a person's memory to a very specific geographic coordinate.
It creates a tangible destination for you, a place on a map where you can physically go and tell yourself, here's where they are. Culturally, that is how we make something completely invisible. The concept of death feels visible and concrete.
But imagine encountering a philosophy that looks at all that heavy mahogany, all those polished marble monuments, and basically says, no, you have this entirely backward.
Right, like the absolute best thing you can do when you die is vanish completely.
Exactly. And that is the blueprint we are unpacking today on this deep dive. We are looking at a 2009 text titled The Funeral System of Lifechanyuan, written by Su Feng.
Yeah, it outlines the doctrines of a community called Lifechanyuan, and specifically their physical settlement known as the New Oasis for Life.
And just to be clear up front, we are looking at this strictly to understand the ideas presented in the text. We are not endorsing or evaluating the religious beliefs of this specific community.
Definitely not. We're diving into it because it blends a pretty ruthless, pragmatic environmentalism with a deeply complex spiritual doctrine.
Right. So, okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand where this philosophy ends up, we first have to look at how Shufeng views the massive historical catalog of human burial practices.
Yeah, the author catalogs a staggering variety of methods from across human history and geography, basically pointing out that every culture has engineered its own unique mechanism for dealing with the physical body.
The list is wild when you really look at it. I mean, you have inhumation, which is just your standard burial in the ground. You have cremation, obviously.
Sure.
But then the text brings up water burials, where bodies are given to rivers or oceans. It talks about celestial or sky burials, practiced in places like Tibet.
Right, where the body is brought to a mountaintop and left exposed for scavenging birds.
Yeah. It even mentions hanging coffin burials. I don't know if you've ever seen photos of those, but they are incredible. Wooden coffins suspended halfway up sheer cliff faces in parts of Asia.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the idea there was to elevate the body, right? Keeping it away from beasts and bringing the soul physically closer to heaven.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Every single one of those methods represents a distinctly different cultural mechanism. A sky burial operates on the logic of returning biomass directly to the ecosystem.
Right, feeding the birds is a final act of charity.
And a hanging coffin operates on the logic of verticality and preservation. But what the author does with this massive, exhausting historical menu is distill it down. He boils thousands of years of human rituals down to one core binary choice.
Right.
According to the text, no matter what culture you come from, you are fundamentally doing one of two things. You are either preserving the corpse or you are destroying it.
Yeah, which is a really stark way to look at it.
It reminds me of managing a computer hard drive, honestly. Like, when a file is no longer actively being used by the operating system, you only have two functional options.
Archive or delete.
Exactly. Are you archiving the file in cold storage just in case you need to retrieve it later? Or are you deleting it entirely to free up the system's memory?
What's fascinating here is how the text explains the spiritual mechanics behind that binary. Preserving the corpse, archiving the file, to use your analogy, is always done with a specific intent.
Meaning you expect to need it again.
Right. It is meant to give the soul a permanent home, or keep the biological vessel intact because the culture believes in a future physical resurrection. It is an act of holding on.
So the soul remains tied to the vessel.
Exactly. Or at least the culture expects the soul to draw comfort from it. But destroying the corpse operates on completely different logic. The text views the destruction of the physical body not as a tragedy and not as a loss of identity, but as the ultimate act of liberation.
So shredding the wrapper, basically, so the contents can actually get out.
Yeah, destroying the physical shell deliberately untethers the soul. It forces an eviction, liberating the energy so it can move on, whether that means reincarnating into a new form or ascending into a higher heavenly realm.
That is the spiritual argument. But Xu Feng immediately anchors that philosophical argument into some extremely grounded real-world consequences of choosing to archive the body.
Oh, absolutely. The real estate crisis of the dead.
Right, because choosing to preserve bodies, generation after generation, takes up actual physical space on a planet that is not getting any bigger.
And he illustrates this with some very evocative observations. He describes driving past these massive, sprawling cemeteries in places like Harar, Zimbabwe, and Lanzhou, China.
Yeah, he paints a really stark visual of these places. He describes vast landscapes occupying huge tracts of land with thousands upon thousands of tombstones lined up in rows.
Like phantom cities.
Exactly. He says it looks as if thousands of souls are crowded together, quote, talking to the living. And it really forces you to ask, what exactly are those phantom cities saying? Are those stones offering comfort to the people driving by, or are they demanding resources from them?
And the demand for resources is central to the author's critique, because those resources are not merely spatial, they are deeply, punitively financial.
The text actually brings the receipts on this, which I found fascinating. Shui Feng visits a cemetery in Jiuquan.
Right.
He admits it is built beautifully, landscaped like a serene garden, but then he looks at the actual price tag for a plot of dirt. The absolute cheapest gravesite available in this garden was 12,000 RMB.
And the more expensive plots exceeded 30,000 RMB.
Right. His reaction to this isn't anger, though. It is profound sadness. He basically notes that simply existing and surviving in the modern world is already difficult enough for average people. Why should the act of dying add a massive financial burden, potential ruin, and extended misery to surviving relatives?
It is a sharp critique of how the modern funeral industry kind of preys on vulnerability. Like, who is the cemetery actually serving? Is it serving the dead who can no longer appreciate the garden, or is it a tax on the living who feel obligated to purchase it?
I do think we have to pause here, though, and look at the psychology of the living. Because as much as the financial burden is terrible, isn't it perfectly reasonable and deeply human that descendants want a beautiful, comfortable resting place for their loved ones?
Sure, it's deeply human.
When you are drowning in grief, having a physical garden to visit, a stone you can run your hand over that physical anchor soothes the people left behind. You cannot just logic away the biological reality of human grief.
Well, the author actually concedes that point. The text acknowledges that it is completely understandable that offspring want to create these beautiful spaces.
Oh, really? So it doesn't just condemn them?
No, it explicitly states that every soul is worthy of respect and that these monuments do indeed soothe the living and bring them a sense of tranquility. It doesn't frame the urge to build a tomb as malicious or inherently foolish.
Okay, so it understands the emotional mechanism at play.
It does,
Yeah.
but it introduces a superseding moral obligation. The text argues that when we arrange things for the dead, our primary moral duty must be to the living and to future generations.
Right. So inhumation, putting a body in a casket in the ground, fundamentally forces the dead into an eternal competition with the living for vital land and resources.
Exactly. Because that plot of land can never be used for farming, for housing, for a school. It is permanently zoned for a person who is no longer participating in society.
And the text points out that even cremation fails this test if you take the ashes and place them in a massive stone monument, right?
Yes. Or if you purchase a permanent slot in a funeral home wall. The mechanism of the act is identical. You are still carving out a piece of the earth permanently for someone who is no longer using it. By prioritizing the emotional comfort of the current generation, you inevitably bring trouble and scarcity to future generations.
So if preserving the body in the ground destroys the Earth's real estate, the most logical next step for a pragmatic environmentalist would be to let nature reclaim it, right?
You would think so. Just let the ecosystem absorb the biomass.
But Su Feng actually views nature as a biological threat in this scenario.
Yeah, the reasoning here is purely scientific pragmatism rooted in a fear of biological contamination. The text specifically warns against water burials and sky burials.
Because of the mechanics of disease transmission, explain how that works according to the text.
Well, the fear is that if a human dies of a disease and their corpse is thrown into a river or left on a mountain, that diseased flesh will be consumed by fish or vultures or insects.
And they become vectors.
Exactly. They do not just process the biomass. They carry the pathogen back into the ecosystem, potentially transmitting the disease right back into the human population, either through the water supply or the food chain.
So you cannot bury the body because it steals space from the living, and you cannot feed it to nature because it risks causing an epidemic. So what is the actual mechanical solution presented for the Oasis community?
The doctrine advocates for strict, uncompromising cremation, but with a crucial second step.
Scattering the ashes.
Yes. The ashes must be scattered across mountains, rivers, lakes, and seas, completely molecularly dispersed. You cannot keep an urn on a mantle.
You cannot put a plaque on a wall.
There must be absolutely no physical trace left behind.
Zero footprint. And this is where the text introduces a statistic that completely changes the framing of the conversation. The author asserts that for 95% of the dead, their physical remains have absolutely zero value or meaning to them in the afterlife.
None whatsoever.
The elaborate graves, the marble monuments, the preserved ashes, they only serve as a psychological crutch for the surviving descendants.
Which completely reframes the entire funeral industry. It shifts the narrative from an act of honoring the departed into an act of self-soothing by the people left behind.
But if the physical body truly doesn't matter for 95% of souls, it begs a massive logistical question about this cosmology. Where are all these souls actually going once they ditch the wrapper?
That is where the text transitions from practical land management into a highly structured spiritual cosmology. The author asserts that funeral systems are essentially mirrors.
Mirrors for what?
They reflect a culture's fundamental understanding of life. Capital L, capital I, capital F, capital E.
Meaning the ultimate universal mechanism of existence.
Right. According to this doctrine, when a person dies, their soul doesn't just vanish into the ether, and it doesn't just go to one generic afterlife. It is sorted
into one of 4 distinct destinations based on their spiritual progression. Okay, let's look at the actual geography of this afterlife.
First, there is the upper world, which is the realm of the celestial. Second, there is the lower world, which the text divides into very specific layers.
Yeah, the animal layer, the plant layer, and hell.
Yes.
Wait, the plant layer, meaning a human soul could become trapped in the consciousness of a tree.
That is the implication, yes. If your spiritual frequency is low, you might be relegated to the lower consciousness of a plant, unable to move or express, or an animal driven entirely by instinct and survival.
That is terrifying. What are the other 2 options?
The third destination is reincarnation, which means returning directly back to mortality to live another human life in this world.
And the 4th option?
The soul might stay temporarily suspended in what the text calls the yin and yang space.
Which operates kind of like a cosmic waiting room, or a limbo.
Exactly. It is an energetic holding pattern. If a soul doesn't have the momentum to ascend, but hasn't devolved enough to drop into the lower worlds, it gets stuck hovering between realms. Now, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the entire funeral philosophy we have been discussing is designed around a very specific engineered trajectory for the followers of this community.
The Chanyuan Celestials.
Yes, and their intended destination is highly specialized.
They aren't just spinning the roulette wheel of those 4 options and hoping for the best.
Not at all. The text states that after leaving the human world, most Chanyuan celestials are destined exclusively for the higher realms, specifically the 1,000-year world, the 10,000-year world, and ultimately the Elysium Celestial Islands continent.
So they avoid the lower realms entirely.
Right. They will not devolve into animals or plants. They will not reincarnate back into the suffering of the human world. And they certainly won't get stuck hovering in the yin and yang space as lonely ghosts.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because the method of your funeral isn't just a symbolic gesture in this community. It is presented as a functional, mechanical requirement for achieving that ascension to the Elysium Islands.
Yes, it's a prerequisite.
Think about it like trying to escape Earth's gravitational pull in a rocket. To break orbit, a rocket has to shed as much physical weight as possible.
Of course.
If it is carrying unnecessary mass, the gravitational pull of the planet will literally drag it back down into the atmosphere. The text argues that leaving even a single, small trace of your physical remains on Earth, like a pinch of ash in an urn or a small bronze plaque, acts like physical mass weighing down the soul.
The author explicitly says it creates worries and leaves hidden troubles.
Exactly. But it is not just the physical ash that creates the gravity. Think of your surviving family's grief as the actual gravitational pull.
Right, every tear they shed.
Every time they visit your urn, it sends a frequency, a literal emotional tether that reaches up and drags the soul back down toward the human realm. If your family is agonizing over your grave, their grief is tethering you to the earth, preventing you from reaching the Elysium celestial islands.
You have to cut the cord completely.
Absolutely, completely.
And to ensure that these souls successfully escape gravity and break orbit, the community has instituted a set of non-negotiable rules for the living descendants.
And these rules are intense. If you are going to guarantee that your loved one actually makes it to the 10,000-year world, you, as the grieving descendant, are given a very strict do-not-do list.
It is a radical, almost jarring departure from every traditional instinct of mourning.
The text outlines 4 absolute prohibitions. Number 1, do not be extravagant with the body. No fancy caskets, no expensive ceremonies to show off wealth.
Right.
Number 2, and this is the one that really fights against human biology, do not cry for the dead.
Because crying, as we just established with the gravity metaphor, is an active mechanism of pulling them back. It generates those worries in the ascending soul.
You are literally tethering them with your sadness. Number 3, do not make graves or tombstones. And number 4, do not make coffins or urns. You cremate the body and scatter the ashes completely. End of story.
Now, the author is careful to categorize these rules as suggestions for anyone living in the outside world. He states he does not interfere with how secular society treats its relatives.
But for the Chanyuan celestials living inside the physical community, the new oasis for life, these are not suggestions.
No, they are absolute binding mandates. The text literally says, whether you accept them or not, the home will arrange your funeral for you like this.
And if you, as a member, demand a traditional tombstone, the author's advice is incredibly blunt. He basically says, go live somewhere else.
You cannot be a part of the oasis if you insist on leaving a footprint. This raises an important question, though, about how intentional communities balance individual psychology with collective ideology. We are looking at a profound structural tension here.
Wait, so they're promising ultimate spiritual freedom, escaping the cycle of reincarnation entirely, reaching a celestial paradise? But the only way to get that ultimate freedom is to submit to a totalitarian set of rules where your family isn't even allowed to shed a tear at your funeral.
It is a massive contradiction on its face.
Would be totally free in the next life. Your family must be totally restricted in this one. That is a massive contradiction.
It is a paradox, sure. But the text frames this restriction not as a deprivation of human rights, but as an evolutionary leap for the species. The concluding argument of the document is that this strict zero-footprint system is an act of supreme environmental and cultural advancement. By wasting absolutely zero space on the earth, and by removing the crushing financial and emotional burden of maintaining graves from the shoulders of future generations, the text elevates this practice into something holy.
So it's a good thing.
Right. It doesn't call it a cold, hard rule. It calls it a symbol of civilization and a marker of cultural sublimation.
Cultural sublimation, I love that term. In physics, sublimation is when a solid turns instantly into a gas, completely skipping the messy liquid phase.
Exactly.
In this context, it is taking something solid, like a biological body or a granite gravestone, and turning it instantly into spirit, skipping the messy physical decay phase entirely.
It is a total rejection of the physical legacy in favor of a purely spiritual one.
Which really brings the entire journey of this philosophy into focus. We started by looking at the very real, very modern logistical nightmares of expensive, overcrowded cemeteries in places like Lanzhou and Harar.
Thousands of stone markers competing with living, breathing humans for vital space.
Costing grieving families tens of thousands of RMB. We looked at the biohazard risks of returning bodies to nature. And we followed the mechanical logic of Xu Feng's 2009 doctrine all the way to its ultimate conclusion.
That to solve the earthly problem of space and the spiritual problem of ascension, a soul must leave absolutely zero physical trace behind.
No grave, no urn, no tears, just a complete dissolution into the environment. And imagine telling your family that today. Imagine telling your loved ones they aren't allowed to cry or keep a single remnant of you.
It goes against every instinct.
Every instinct you and I have. We are culturally conditioned, almost from birth, to believe that remembering the dead requires a physical object, a monument, a plaque, a locket of hair. We equate physical permanence with the endurance of our love. But this text argues the exact polar opposite.
It argues that true love and ultimate spiritual success requires disappearing without a single trace.
So what does this all mean?
I think it leaves us with a highly provocative, almost uncomfortable question to ponder regarding our modern lives. We are so deeply obsessed as a species with the idea of leaving a legacy. We want to be remembered. We want to leave a footprint. We've talked entirely about physical remains today, graves, ashes, monuments. But what about our digital ones? In an era where our social media profiles, our voicemails, our thousands of photos, and our data live on indefinitely in the cloud, are we creating the exact same spiritual tethers that Xu Feng warned about?
Oh, wow. That's deep.
We spend our whole lives backing up our data so we are never forgotten. But if ultimate spiritual ascension requires deleting your physical file so your loved ones can move on, what happens to your soul if you forget to wipe your massive digital hard drive? Is it possible that the cloud is the ultimate anchor?
It definitely makes you think twice about what you saving to your camera roll, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The ultimate form of legacy might just be an empty hard drive and empty space. That is all for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.